Welcome, everybody. My name is Mina Jane. I'm the director of the Ashland Public Library, and I'm super thrilled to be here with Sean O'Connell, who wrote a book about Bruce Willis, who I just is just an icon of film and TV and being married and all of that stuff. We will talk about all of that in just a minute. I just wanted to say thanks to the Friends of the Ashland Public Library for supporting all of our programs. I'd also like to thank Sean because he let us share this program with other libraries. And as you probably know, if you've ever seen me, I think when libraries work together, we make magic. So I really love that Sean allowed us to do that. I would also like to let you know that you can buy Sean's book about Bruce Willis. I'm going to pull up my description so I get the name right. It's called Bruce Willis, Celebrating the Cinematic Legacy of an Unbreakable Hollywood Icon. And I will, there you go. Thank you. You came prepared. Yeah, you can buy a signed book from Sean's website, and I will put a link to that either in the chat or in the recap email I'll send to everybody after the program. And if you have questions, which I know you will, please put them in the Q&A, which is a button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You can use the chat to chat with each other, but I can't take questions from there generally just because it goes by too quickly most of the time. So like I said, I'm thrilled to be here with Sean. He immediately got back to me when I reached out to him to do this talk because he is like so enthusiastic about this book about Bruce Willis. And I just think he hit a nerve culturally. So Sean, welcome to the Ashland Library stage. I'm so glad you're here and so willing to do this, spending your time doing this when you could be writing or playing golf or, going to movies.
Well, no, I kind of realized so this is my third book and I did three of them back to back to back. And one thing that I learned is that I treated each book like the opening weekend of a movie because I've been in the film industry forever.
Yep.
And with the film industry, it's whatever is opening weekend, and then we immediately move on to whatever the next film is. And so I had to kind of learn about the fact that books have long legs, and you have to get out there and talk about them and let people know that because if you step into a bookstore, you are a tiny drop in an ocean of possible titles. And
Yeah.
so any opportunity to let people know that this book is out there, and that there's and find Bruce Willis fans is wonderful. So thank you so much for giving me the platform because as an author, anyone who's interested in hearing about your process or learning about your book is always welcome. So I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. So yes, so we're going to start a little bit with who Sean is, and then we're going to get into the book and our thoughts and questions about Bruce. So Sean, we were talking a little bit before we started, is that you have been in the industry, the celebrity industry for a long time. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you evolved into a book writer.
Sure. So I was a movie geek from the earliest days. Like when I was a kid, I would ride my bike to the local VHS store and just spend hours, combing the shelves and picking up those, big VHS box tapes and reading the descriptions on the back and eventually got into a rotation with the woman who managed the store who would just give me piles of stacks of tapes and say like go home and watch this kind of thing. She knew I'm a storytelling junkie and really film is just the kind of method that I really like to absorb them. But she gave me everything. She gave me musicals and westerns and horror films and romance movies and it was in fifth grade. I remember where I was homesick for a day and my aunt and uncle had a laser disc player and they gave me the only two laser discs that they owned, which was Superman 2 and Dirty Dancing. And I watched both of them and loved both of them. I was blown away by both of them. And I went into school the next day and I was like, oh my God, I watched Superman 2 and it was so great. And then I saw this movie called Dirty Dancing and it was phenomenal. And I was like, there's this guy, he's a dancer, and this family goes away on vacation and they're not supposed to be together. I was in fifth grade. I didn't really understand that it was like basically Romeo and Juliet. And all my friends were like, why would you like that movie? And I was like, I don't know, because it was awesome. And it was like, it taught me at that stage that like, love what you love, like don't fall into a pitfall of just, appreciating a certain type of movie kind of thing. So from that point on, I watched everything under the sun, whatever I can get my hands on. And I studied communications in college. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but at one point, shortly after graduating, a friend of mine who I would talk movies with all the time said to me, you really should do this for a living. Like you should figure out some way to analyze film and critique film. And a light bulb went off, and I kind of said, like, oh, I guess people do that. Like that is a job. Back then it was more of a job than it is now. But
Mhm.
um, so I started the process, and I wrote for publications. At that time, this was late 90s, early 2000s, the internet was starting to take off. It was kind of easy to get a job for a website because everybody needed content as much as they could. Nobody paid anything, but you got experience and you learned how to become a writer. And I just kept falling upwards, I guess. I, worked at a TV station that let me go on and review films, eventually made contacts at the different studios, and I've been with my current website, Cinema Blend, for since 2013.
Mhm.
But I've been in the entertainment sphere for 22 years, so
Mhm.
a while. And what you don't realize is that entire time you're building a body of knowledge. You're watching everything that's coming out. You're going back and rewatching old stuff, and you're just processing it, and it allows you to comment on things, with more experience, a little bit more knowledge,
Mhm.
and then eventually come around to figure out a couple different topics that you want to write books about.
Well, I think it's interesting. Like you've started off with VHS, so that means like you've really seen the growth of media, through the ages, I'll say. But I want to talk just really quickly about reviewing because
Mhm.
you love movies, you love film. So does reviewing actually like dig into that a little bit? Does it ruin it a little bit?
It has in over time. It has over time, sure. Because you take something that you love and now it's your job, right?
Right.
Um, but I've only felt that way within the past couple of years. It's still like for the first 20 years, it's been a complete rush.
Yeah.
That like your job is to go out and see whatever the new movie is.
Hmm.
What you don't understand is that like we normally go see whatever's coming out on Friday on the Tuesday week of opening. And so I can't think of a Tuesday night that I haven't been sitting in a movie theater here in Charlotte, North Carolina, with a preview audience watching whatever's coming.
Hmm.
And you are constantly watching stuff with a critical eye. You're constantly, I am anyway, thinking about like, all right, well, what's my opening going to be? What ideas do I want to convey? I take notes while I'm watching a movie, so I'm always just jotting down stuff. It's rare. And so nowadays I actually really enjoy television because I don't review TV at all.
Hmm.
I can get lost in a series, and just appreciate it for what it is and not
Hmm.
think about what I'm going to say after the fact.
Hmm.
But movies have become, I'll never say a chore. Like, listen, I'm not hauling brick somewhere, or, but yes, a little bit of the love of and the passion that I had early on starts to dissipate because it becomes work. It does become work after a while.
Right. But you also did something really interesting is that your first book was about Zack Snyder's cut of Justice League, and your second
Mhm.
book was about Spider-Man, and now your third
Yeah.
book is about Bruce Willis. So it's not like you're doing like the Siskel and Ebert type of reviews, right? Where you're just like, oh, that book, it's a popular movie, so we're gonna hate it.
Yeah. No, well, there's different types of film criticism, and I've written all different types. Some is strictly like, should I go see this movie in theaters? Just on a basic level, is this worth your time and is it worth your money, kind of thing.
Mhm.
And that can be reduced to the thumbs up, thumbs down model of just like, yes, I recommend this.
Mhm.
Then there's like the next step beyond that, which is criticism, where you really start to dig into what works and what doesn't work. And usually that takes place after the fact. People have seen the same movie you have. They have talking points. You have talking points. It's opinions. It's arguments. With the books, boy, what I realized as an author is you have to love the subject that you're writing about because you're going to live in that subject for 2 years plus
Yep.
of research, writing, rewriting, the entire process that comes with it. And so I'm really thankful that the three topics that I chose so far have been things that I was really obsessed with. The Snyder Cut, when it was happening, was a day-to-day occurrence on Cinema Blend. We were always looking for a different way to cover it, a fresh way to cover it. and it felt like it was moving at a breakneck pace where like breaking news was happening all the time and it was important stuff to cover. Um, Spider-Man with his history, I knew there was enough there to really dig into, and there was like salacious stuff at each stop. Like the Raimi stuff had some really interesting twists. The Mark Webb movies were kind of failures for different reasons. The transition of Sony admitting to Marvel, like, we don't know what to do with Spider-Man, come help us, and leads to Tom Holland. I knew there were good stories to tell throughout there. And then when you get to something like Bruce, it really was like it was like moving from a tiny piece of land to a continent because there's
Mhm.
just so much to cover. And I don't doubt that people, three or four more people could do Bruce Willis books that are totally different from mine and cover different aspects of his life.
Mhm.
And they'll be equally entertaining. But like for this one, I really wanted to just focus on his filmography and why I thought it was important,
Mhm.
and celebrate it because to speak to your point, I don't love film criticism that's just there to tear down. I prefer film criticism that is turning people on to movies that they might not have heard of before
Mhm.
and trying to pair with, hey, if you love this, then try this because this might really be up your alley. And then, and opening up the doors to people. It's similar to the way that that lady at the video store did for me as a kid. Like,
Mhm.
try this. You might like this. This is going to be good. Watch this.
That's right. So what I really like about your book, so what we are talking about with them, is that you give us the behind the scenes look at what was going on. So yes, the Marvels movies, but like, what was it that turned you from the Marvels movies into almost a biography of, or as you say, celebration of Bruce Willis? What was that moment where you were like, I'm going to write about Bruce Willis?
Well, the catalyst for it was when he announced his retirement.
Yeah.
It was about 2 years ago now at this point where Demi Moore posted an Instagram post,
Mhm.
and it said that due to his diagnosis with aphasia, that Bruce was going to retire. And I was really moved by that. As somebody who I'd been an enormous fan of his entire career. I mean, when Moonlighting came out, I was around 12, and it was the perfect sweet spot for that type of humor.
Mhm. Yeah.
The fast paced, a little bit edgy. There's that whole will they or won't they relationship with him and Sybil Shepherd. And that was my level of humor. I just dug that.
Mhm.
And then Die Hard. So Die Hard has been my textbook answer to what's your favorite movie of all time. Every critic gets asked that a bazillion times.
Mhm.
And the original Die Hard was always my favorite movie.
Interesting.
So I tracked his career. I just followed him wherever he went. And when he announced his retirement, I really felt like we were losing something. I felt like the industry was closing the door on a chapter that it just isn't as prevalent anymore. There are not movie stars like Bruce Willis anymore. There are not people who have his type of career. There aren't. Okay, so there are one or two actors left who you can put their name above the title and
Mhm.
people will go see it just because they're in them. Like Denzel Washington probably still has a draw like that. Meryl Streep, but even like the Julia Roberts, the Sandra Bullocks, they don't draw the way that they used to. People
Mhm.
now go to see a franchise or an IP. Whereas when Bruce was in his prime, Harrison Ford, Mel Gibson, all these actors, you would put them above the title and whatever it was that people would go see it.
Mhm.
And I wanted to do a book that went through Bruce's filmography, talked about some of the choices that he made for the movies that he made, remind people some of the movies that he's been in. Without fail, anytime I do one of these interviews, I bring up a movie like 12 Monkeys,
Oh, I love
uh,
that movie.
yeah, or The Fifth Element or something, and everyone goes, "Oh my God, I totally forgot he was in that." Oh, he's great in that movie, and I'm like, yeah, he's a versatile actor who very, people will be like, oh yeah, the Bruce Willis, the Die Hard guy,
Mhm.
or the Moonlighting guy. And yes, he's that, but he's so many other things. And so this
Mhm.
felt like a good opportunity to take his career. And in addition to going through his decisions, almost talk about what was happening in the industry at that time. Like when he gets involved in Pulp Fiction, it was very much the rise of like indie directors, and Miramax trying to find the next big things with Clerks and Steven Soderbergh and Tarantino coming up to the ranks and Bruce plugging into that and becoming huge in Pulp Fiction, or the sci-fi run that all of his action counterparts went on,
Mhm.
which then, like I said, leads to him doing Fifth Element and 12 Monkeys at a time when Schwarzenegger's doing Total Recall and Stallone's doing Demolition Man. one of the aspects that I think someone else could write about is just his entire Planet Hollywood days. Like he was a mega movie star launching those restaurants, around the country, around the world. And they would pop up, him and Schwarzenegger and Stallone and Demi Moore would pop up, and it would be an instant party.
Mhm.
And they traded off their celebrity that way. And I find
Mhm.
that aspect of him really fascinating as well, too.
So I'm going to ask everybody in the audience to say in the chat, what was their favorite Bruce Willis? I won't say movie because he's been in TV shows. In fact, Sean, you reminded me that he made a cameo in Friends, which I'd completely forgotten. But now I'm gonna have to do an entire rewatch of the show just for
So here's a
that.
little fun story about that. So he's in the comedy, The Whole Nine Yards with
Mhm.
Matthew Perry.
Oh, that's right.
And he does not have any faith in the material at all. He thinks that movie's going to bomb. Bruce thinks the movie's going to bomb. And he bets Matthew Perry, if this movie opens to number one at the box office, I'll come on your show. Because I mean, at the time, Friends was like the biggest show on network television. And Perry takes the bet. The movie opens to number one. It stays at number one for 2 weekends, I believe. And then Bruce says, okay, that's fine. I'll come on the show. And it ends up winning him his second Emmy Award. He won one for Moonlighting and he won one for Friends. So
Yeah, I'd heard that story, but I always think it's interesting that sort of like the serendipitous way these things happen. As you said, he got an Emmy for it, and he was just kind of like, I'm just gonna do it because I lost that bet.
yeah, but so this is what I think is so great about Bruce. He was an unquestionable movie star, but he was more comfortable in an ensemble. He was good about setting other people up and letting them shine.
Mhm.
And so that worked perfectly for Friends because that ensemble was rock solid, and he just was there to sort of have them do their jokes and contribute when he could. But that's why he's great in Pulp Fiction, opposite Sam Jackson and John Travolta. That's why he's so good in The Sixth Sense in support of Haley Joel Osment and Toni
Mhm.
Collette.
Mhm.
He didn't demand that the focus be on him all the time. And I think that that's a rare trait for an A-list celebrity. And it's something very special that he had.
Mhm. Yes, I'm seeing some people saying Sixth Sense in the chat, and that was also my favorite movie, Bruce in it. But I was gonna say, when you talk about Planet Hollywood and Schwarzenegger and Stallone would show up and Demi Moore, and I always thought that of the four of them, Bruce Willis seemed the most accessible.
Mm,
Just the nice guy that you could probably have a beer with, right? So if
yeah.
I drank beer, but was he like in all these stories? Did you discover like what kind of person he was?
I don't think he was.
Oh.
I don't think that he was, which is funny. I mean, I think for a period of time, he definitely was. He comes from southern New Jersey, kind of the outside of the Philadelphia area. Absolutely has that blue collar roots about him, which makes him relatable. That was his quality. John McClane in Die Hard was the different type of action hero because for better or for worse, we can almost picture ourselves as that person in that scenario. Um, and what would we do if we were at a Christmas party and all of a sudden terrorists showed up and we had to run around without our shoes on, and try and stay one step ahead of the cops? Could we do it? We would try,
Mhm.
whereas Schwarzenegger would burst through the wall and, have two guns blazing and it would be a
Yeah.
completely different movie.
Yep.
I think eventually Bruce, without a doubt, got extremely famous extremely fast.
Mhm.
And with that comes a degree of, you start to believe in yourself a little bit too much. And so when he went through a period with The Bonfire of the Vanities, which was
Oh.
a movie he made with Brian De Palma, there's a book called The Devil's Playground. The Devil's Playground or The Devil's Candy? I'm blanking on the title of it. I think it might be The Devil's Candy, where a journalist lived on the set and essentially documented all the behind the scenes stuff.
Mm.
And Bruce doesn't come off too good in that in that he comes off a little pompous and a little bit full of himself, and he had a security detail and all this stuff. But now at the same time, when he married Demi Moore, those two fueled the gossip rags for years. And I do think he got pretty jaded to how he was covered in the press. I mean, there's a whole bit where they escape to Idaho and essentially buy a town in Idaho
Mhm.
just so they can disappear, just so they have a place to go to. So I mean, I think anyone who's kind of under that white hot glare of spot, the celebrity and Hollywood, it turns on you eventually. And so that's another big reason why I guess I admire his 40-year career as long as I do, because you see so many young talents who just burn out. They go through it really fast. It chews them up, but he figured out pretty quickly how to consistently sort of challenge himself in different roles, take different projects, work with different directors, stay in the industry, and not just repeat himself and coast. But there can be an expose. So I opened the book with a quote from him, where a celebrity journalist once asked him if he would ever write his own memoirs, kind of thing. And he said he couldn't because he would have to tell the true story and too many people would get hurt. And I bet there are some amazing Bruce stories out there, but for now, they're staying off the record.
That is okay, because this is we want people to have good vibes with him.
Yes.
Tracy says, Penns Grove proud, always remembered his roots. And she PGHS class of 1981 graduated with Bruce's brother, David, who was a director.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah,
Very cool.
super cool. So let's go back a little bit to Bruce's roots. You said that he got big fast, but he wasn't super young. So had he been like sort of like in Hollywood doing stuff, and then he finally hit moonlighting?
New York theater. He was doing New York theater and was an East Coast guy, and was doing what several other, performers trying to make it in the industry do. He tended bar.
Mhm.
And from the stories that I've heard, and John Goodman, the actor John Goodman, tells a lot of these stories as well too, who was part of that acting community. Bruce, as a bartender, he worked at the bar. Do you remember the Tom Cruise movie Cocktail
Mhm.
with the bottle spinning and all that jazz? So the bar that's inspired by, Bruce worked at as an actual bartender. And it was like a show. Like people came to that bar for a show.
Mhm.
And the way that John Goodman explained it is that he knew Bruce was going to be a star just from the way he tended bar. He was constantly entertaining people with jokes. He was calling out basketball scores. He had like a repartee. Like it was like it was a show within a show kind of thing.
Mhm.
Um, but it was only when he tested for moonlighting and went out to California specifically like for that part, that he took off overnight. And it was legitimately the definition of like an overnight sensation. That show was supposed to be for Sybil Shepherd. It was modeled for her to become a starring vehicle.
Mhm.
And every review from the get-go was like, there's no show without him, kind of thing. And it's their chemistry. It was their spark. It was the two of them together.
Mhm.
But he quickly overshadowed her, and that became like the David Addison show, and he just popped off the screen. So, but then it took a little while for films to figure out how to use him. I mean, he tried Blind Date, which is with John Larroquette and Kim Basinger,
Mhm.
and he kind of played the straight man in that, but he liked that kind of zany madcap comedy.
Mhm.
Then he did a movie called Sunset with James Garner, which was a little bit more of a James Garner movie.
Mhm.
Um, and then he got Die Hard. And between Moonlighting and Die Hard, it was like global success.
Right.
Then he was on. We were talking a bit about royalties, and it's like you have a hit like Die Hard, and you're set for life.
Right.
And this is the first 5 years of his professional career.
Mhm.
So it's like, where do you go from there, kind of thing.
It's a
So,
tough
and then
one.
an early one too that also was extremely successful for him was Look Who's Talking. He was the voice of the baby, but like it was a huge hit for him, that and the sequel. So he had a lot of early success, and then he had to sort of figure out his way forward after that.
Yeah. Well, he definitely had a very iconic voice.
Mm.
I think John Travolta was in that movie as one of the babies, right? So like they really did the voice actors right in that movie. I did want to ask people in our audience if they believe that Die Hard is a Christmas movie. I would take a poll, but I can never figure out how to do polls in Zoom. But
This may separate the crowd.
that's right. Yes or no? Die Hard is a Christmas movie or not? Okay, there we go. We already got a yes. Excellent.
Yes.
So where did he go from there? Where did he go from these massive, successful movies? And how did he keep in the spotlight?
Well, he took a few really big swings. Post Die Hard, he did a movie called Mortal Thoughts, which allowed him to be in a movie with Demi Moore. And in that movie, he played a really unlikable guy. He was the husband of Demi Moore's best friend. He was a drunk and an abuser. And they end up killing him. And then they have to sort of hide the body. But like it wasn't played for laughs. It was a drama kind of thing. So I think
Mhm.
around that time, Weekend at Bernie's also came out, and they were
I was
doing
gonna say,
different
it
things with
sounds
the
like
corpse.
that, only not so funny.
No, but very serious. But then what he also tried to do was Hudson Hawk, and Hudson
Mm.
Hawk is the one that's like this was Bruce's. Well, that and Bonfire of the Vanities, like one right after the other, were Bruce's two big bombs, right?
Mhm.
So with Hudson Hawk, I think he put everything into that movie that he thought his audiences wanted. If you go back and rewatch that movie now, it has action, it has music, they're singing cat burglars. And around that time, Bruce was also trying to put out albums. He was the return of Bruno, and he was singing a lot of the broad, Sinatra staples and Under the Boardwalk and songs like that. He was trying to make it with a career, a music career. And it had that sort of slapstick moonlighting comedy, but it was unfiltered. It was too much of that, right?
Mhm.
And the audience roundly rejected that. They were just like, no, we do not want to see any more of this from
Mhm.
you. And I think that's a real turning point for Bruce, because if Hudson Hawk hits and people love it, I think he makes five more of those and you don't get any more Die Hard movies, you know? But
Right.
the minute that the audience was like, no, we don't want goofy Bruce Willis, we don't want this slapsticky bit, he falls right back to the action genre. And he does movies like Striking Distance with Sarah Jessica Parker, where he's a Pittsburgh riverboat, cop. He does The Last Boy Scout with Damon Wayans. He does Die Hard with a Vengeance. He runs back to the franchise. So the action genre for him, I think, was always a safety net that he could come back to when
Mhm.
this career got a little bit dicey. But then he would very quickly, he would build up his cachet in the industry again. He would remind people that he's a movie star, because without question, he is a charismatic, he's got what you need to be a movie star. You can't take your eye off him when he's on there. But then he would build up that cachet, and then he would go spend it on something else. And he would do Pulp Fiction, or The Sixth Sense. And he would find a director with a unique voice and a unique story, and he would back them. And I think that his ability to do that kept him relevant in the industry for a long period of time. And I heard from several directors and interviewed several directors for this book who said that the one thing that Bruce would give them was he would run studio interference, essentially. And he allowed them, if he believed in the director's story, he would be the one to stand up to the studio and say, stop with your notes, let the kid make whatever movie we want that we're trying to make here. We believe in the script, we believe in the story. Because M. Night Shyamalan was not M. Night Shyamalan when he made The Sixth Sense. He had a feature film before that, but this was essentially his debut.
Mhm.
Ryan Johnson was still an unproven director when they made Looper together.
Mhm.
Quentin Tarantino had Reservoir Dogs, which was a popular movie, but he wasn't quite Quentin Tarantino yet, so
Mhm.
Pulp Fiction was a bit of a gamble. And again, Bruce stepping in and saying, John Travolta was a comeback story for that movie, and no one, and Sam Jackson had been in a lot of stuff, but he wasn't Sam Jackson yet. So they kind of sold that movie on Bruce's appearance in it and his willingness to be in it. So he would get in there and back these really exciting filmmakers, and I think that nose that he had for strong screenplays really helped him stay relevant for a long part of his career.
So this is also the time that he was with Demi Moore,
Mm,
and Demi Moore, of course, was with the Brat Pack. She was, that very young, dynamic group that was making, the Breakfast Club and St. Elmo's Fire and things like that. How did
sure.
he fit into that group, or did he?
I think he was tertiary to that group. He definitely wasn't a member of it.
Yeah.
But
He was
being
a bit
married to
older.
her. So just recently, Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively are married. They had Deadpool and Wolverine, and then she had It Ends With Us, the adaptation of that. By those two movies coming out in the weekend and having the dominant weekend, they broke a record that had previously been held by Bruce Willis and Demi Moore, because people overlook how successful Demi Moore's career was. But when Bruce Willis put out Die Hard 2, she put out Ghost. And Ghost was a behemoth at the box office. That
Mhm.
movie was enormous.
Yeah.
And after that, she had A Few Good Men. She had Striptease, which was a big movie for her. And then these, Brat Pack movies that you were talking about, St. Elmo's Fire and things like that she appeared in. So the two of them together, I don't think that he really ran in that sort of party scene with the Brat Pack kids, but like just being a power couple with him and Demi at the time was, Indecent Proposal was another one that she was in with Redford and Woody Harrelson.
That's a
Two
movie
of
I
them.
love to hate. I love to hate it.
But they had remarkable runs, just remarkable runs for a Hollywood couple.
Yeah, and a long run for a Hollywood couple, not just being together as a couple, but like putting out these movies, like you said,
Mhm.
that are iconic to me, growing up in the 80s.
Well, and The Fifth Element, which is the movie that Bruce did with not Terry Gilliam, I'm blanking on the director's name, Luc Besson,
Mhm.
which is an offbeat science fiction, action comedy kind of thing. It ends up opening the Cannes Film Festival the year that it comes out. And it
Mm.
just doesn't feel like the type of movie that would open the Cannes Film Festival. But the director of the fest said, I chose this as opening night because it meant Bruce Willis and Demi Moore were coming to my red carpet. And if you can get those two at that time, you're getting the two of the biggest celebrities on the planet, and it's instantly putting the festival on the map. And I
Yeah.
was like, oh, that's really fascinating that just their involvement, helps a movie like that gets chosen as the opening night for something as prestigious as Cannes.
Yeah, I mean, it's like now when Taylor Swift shows up at a Starbucks, everybody goes to, all of a sudden, everybody's like a Starbucks fan. They've switched over from Dunkin' Donuts.
Exactly. Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
But what was her influence with him and his with her? Because they remained friends long after they divorced, to the point where she announced his retirement.
They've remained very close this entire time. And I think what bonds them is their three daughters. They have three daughters together. Bruce also has two children with his new wife, Emma Hemming.
Mhm.
But I think even though they separated and again stayed together for a long time, I think he and Demi just chose like we're still always going to be the parents of our daughters. We're going to have a life together because of this. And she has been prevalent during this treatment that he's been going through. They're very private about it, understandably, but Emma Hemming shares a lot on her social media about, their day-to-day struggles. And I know she's also working on her own book about what it's been like to be a caretaker for Bruce and the challenges of that. I mean, I've only heard from a few people who have had relatives with aphasia who just say it's a nightmare. You watch them slowly slip away and it's painful to watch kind of thing. And so yeah, I deeply admire Demi for still being part of that, for helping out as best as she can. I think they'll always love each other. It just maybe felt like the relationship, what it was, ran its course. And again, so hard to be in a healthy relationship in Hollywood, in a place like Hollywood, which is why it's rare. It's few and far between that a relationship like that stays together.
But they do have a healthy relationship. I mean, like you said, the marriage ran its course, but they remained close friends. It seems
Mhm.
like since, I mean, like he remarried, but they still like hang out together. Again, to the point where she announced his retirement versus him or his wife.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's true. And I can't explain it. I guess they went through just formative years together, and lived through massive changes in both of their careers and their personal lives.
Mhm.
And they were partners on the Planet Hollywood thing, which is unusual because it was like Bruce and Sly and Arnold, which made sense. And then she was the fourth partner, so that's how integral she was to the relationship. But
Mhm. Yeah,
and
no, I mean, I
she's
think
actually coming back around. She has a movie called The Substance that's going to be opening in September, and she's
Mhm.
getting she's getting raves for it, and may even be in the awards consideration. So we may get a lot more Demi, between now and the end of the year, and maybe that leads to a lot more updates on Bruce as well too.
Mhm. Yeah, but as you said, she is an amazing actress on her own, in her own right, regardless of any relationship. But it's just interesting because, like you said, Hollywood relationships don't last, but yet this one really did in whatever format it was going to be in.
Sure.
Yeah. So as Jan says, any form of dementia is just awful. And again, he's like maybe 60, 65, right? He's probably not super old.
He's 63 or 64. So yeah,
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 yeah.
young.
So it's going to be a long goodbye for him because he could be around for another 20, 30 years.
Well, and he
But I don't
also,
actually know enough about aphasia to know if that is true.
but I also do think he's getting like the best care possible. Obviously he has the money that can afford that, and he has the support system in place through his family, which they're there to take care of his every need. So you're right, that could even sustain him physically longer. But then the question becomes like, who is he? It's it's heartbreakingly sad when someone who has made an entire life of communicating,
Yeah.
of performing, loses their ability to communicate. So
Mhm.
I can't imagine at all what's feels like and what he's going through.
Right. Barbara says that she thinks he's 69. He was born in
Oh,
1955.
okay.
So thank you. Um, can you just give us a quick definition of aphasia?
From what I understand, it's a disorder, a brain disorder that affects your ability to process speech. And quite often it happens after a stroke. There's two other recognizable celebrities that have suffered from it. Sharon Stone had it, and Amelia Clark from Game of Thrones
Oh.
both had it. And they both had it after examples of extreme swelling of the brain, and the brain absorbed so much blood that it affected their ability to. And Amelia Clark had a stroke. It was during a workout during her Game of Thrones training kind of thing,
Mhm.
and she was afraid she was going to lose the ability to communicate. But Bruce's aphasia has graduated to frontal temporal disorder, which I believe is obviously more severe, and again just starts to affect this front area of the brain where a person's ability to process speech and communicate. So you lose your ability to talk, you lose your ability to understand words. And I mean, it's just we know so little about the brain as it is. So when things start to go south, I think it's terrifying.
Mhm. So he could have come back from aphasia, but he's not going to come back from this temporal um
Frontal temporal disorder.
disorder.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, from what I understand, no, there's no
No.
cure for it.
So sad. We will come back to this a little bit, but I wanted to go back to his career a little bit because now we're getting into the point where he's been this major, massive star. He's done all these crazy and successful movies. When did he start showing signs of not being himself?
Probably in the mid to late 2000s. So he's in Armageddon, he's in Looper, he's in the two Red movies
Yeah. Oh
with
my
Morgan
gosh, such
Freeman.
good movies.
Yeah, Morgan Freeman, John Malkovich, these
Yeah.
guys. He's still himself. Then he does a movie in 2010 called Cop Out with Kevin Smith.
Hmm.
It's one of the first times it's like a buddy cop comedy. Kevin Smith directed it. It's him and Tracy Morgan. It's Bruce Willis and Tracy Morgan, and it's the prototypical, two cops who hate each other,
Mhm.
partners have to team up on a thing. But it's unbelievably bad. The script is really bad. For the first time, Bruce looks bored, and people who are paying attention to him start to think like, why did you do this? This doesn't seem like something you should do. But then around that same time, he also shows up in Moonrise Kingdom, the Wes Anderson film. He's great in it.
Yeah.
And Wes Anderson has a very specific patter, and a way to deliver his dialogue. And Bruce nails it. Bruce, I think, has that ability, going back to his moonlighting days, to really plug into the type of dialect that a director wants. And it can be fast, and it could be stilted, and it could be, whatever you're trying to get. I think he can really master that. So he was great, great, great in Moonrise Kingdom. Around that time, he starts to appear in a bunch of these direct to DVD films. They all have generally, one or two words, titles. It's like Cosmic Sin, or um, Trauma Center, or things like this. And you're like, what is he doing? I don't understand why he's in this. And you don't really watch them. You kind of, you think, oh, I don't have no interest in that movie. But the more he does them, the more I actually was like, like one was called like Out of Death, like just a horrible title. So I'm like, what is he doing? So I start to watch these movies, and it becomes very clear that like they're all shot in Georgia, in the woods. Bruce is very clearly on set for like a day.
Mhm.
They film all of his stuff in a day, and then they sprinkle him throughout the movie. So there's a main plot going on, and then he's generally playing like the local law enforcement
Mhm.
or maybe a CIA agent kind of thing. But he's putting out four of these a year. And you start to think like, what is going on, sort of thing. Then as you get further and further into it, it starts to be, you know, he's clearly not in the scene with the person that he's talking to. You know, if it's a two-person scene and they're in the woods, they'll get his reaction and his lines, and then when they cut to the other person talking, it's a body double, of Bruce, and the
Mhm.
person is speaking to them. Just little things that if you pay attention to filmmaking, you realize that, like, oh, Bruce isn't even in this scene, or Bruce isn't even in this movie, or there's a fight sequence and it's clearly not him. It's another bald guy who looks much younger and is moving much faster than him. And so this was before the aphasia diagnosis. So then the diagnosis comes out and you think to yourself, like, oh, all right. Well, that at least explains his performance in all of these things, but didn't explain necessarily his choice to do them. I still don't have any concrete answer. I've heard whispers from people who tell me that, like, he wanted to set his family up, financially and make sure that they were set. And I've heard whispers that people tell me he just loved being on a set. He still loved acting and wanted to do it as much as he could. But you would hear that, like, even back as far as there was a movie called Glass, which was the ending of the M. Night Shyamalan trilogy that was Unbreakable and Split and Glass. And on Glass, reportedly, he had to wear an earpiece so that they could just feed him his lines because he couldn't remember anything that he had to say in them. Um, so the end was coming. I guess when you lose the ability to communicate and you're an actor, you're not going to be able to do it forever, kind of thing. And it's sad because when you look at his contemporaries, Harrison Ford is still churning out Indiana Jones movies. He's about to be in a Marvel film, going to play
Mhm.
the president of the United States. There are people that are Bruce's contemporaries who are still acting to this day. And I don't doubt that there could have been a tremendous run of character actor parts. Here's an example of one. Quentin Tarantino allegedly is going to do one final film. It's going to be his 10th film and he's going to be done after that.
Mhm.
He wanted to write a part, that had Bruce in it, sort of thing. I don't think it's ever going to happen because I think Quentin's probably 2 or 3 years off from doing it, and I don't think Bruce has the ability to physically do it anymore.
Mhm.
But I don't doubt that there would be a slew if Bruce were healthy and continuing to work. I don't doubt that a slew of directors would have been writing parts for him and trying to
Mhm.
get ways to involve him. You
Yeah.
know, like a Morgan Freeman or someone else like that who just continuously pop. Clint Eastwood's in his 90s and he's still directing films.
Wow.
So he could have been doing it forever. And I think that's a big part of the reason when he announced his retirement that it hit me as hard as it did. That, like, we still had 20 years of Bruce, probably. We had 20 to 30 years of Bruce. And it's getting cut short and it hurts.
Mhm. So while you were writing this book, was there anything that really surprised you that you learned about Bruce or his history or his career?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I convinced myself that he's a tremendous actor. That was the premise going in, but then, like, watching so many of his and I watched every film. He was in 115 movies
Oh, wow.
and I watched every single one of them. And his versatility, and his range truly blew me away. And we were talking about, The Sixth Sense and how later on in his career he came to appreciate um all that he could do with silence and stoicism. And he didn't need to be bigger than the room. He could sit there. Go back and rewatch just the scene of the I See Dead People, interaction back and forth.
Oh, yeah. I've seen
Bruce
it several
gives
times.
Bruce gives just enough. He knows what the scene needs and he gives it.
Mhm.
He's not overacting. He's not chewing scenery. I'll use 12 Monkeys as another great example. I just recently got to do a screening of that here in North Carolina as part of a book signing thing. Brad Pitt is his co-star in that film, and Brad Pitt is playing a fellow patient in the mental institution where Bruce ends up. And he is devouring scenery. He's just swinging for the fences. And Bruce just sits there quietly and lets the story unfold and picks his moments. And I was blown. I knew he could do that. I appreciated his ability to do it, but seeing him do it in different films was like floored me.
Yeah.
And then the next year he would do Armageddon and he'd be bigger than life and drilling into an asteroid. And
Mhm.
and the thing about him was that he was believable in all of those. You bought him as a child psychologist and you bought him as the oil driller in space. And I don't know what other people have that kind of versatility that audiences are willing to follow them, into any sort of path that way. Like, my running joke is always like, Could Stallone have done The Sixth Sense? Like, no, not even close.
No.
Could Schwarzenegger have done Unbreakable? No, of course not. But Bruce could have done Total Recall in a heartbeat,
Mhm.
and he could do Demolition Man if he wanted to. That he had a range that the other guys did not at all. And
Yeah.
and so I really admire that about him.
So I was going to say that about 12 Monkeys, also another one of my very favorite movies of his, was that he's the one I remember in that movie. You said that Brad Pitt was, chewing up the scenery and stuff, and that's true, but he was the one I remembered.
Yeah.
For some, I don't know why, because, of course, Brad Pitt's beautiful and, that's all I can say about him. But, because of the way that Bruce did his scenes or was directed to do his scenes, I was like, I also like, it's been many years since I've seen it. But again, why did he do that? Like what was in him to make him realize that he couldn't just be an actor, an action star? And he would go back to it, like you said, when he was feeling insecure or he had a break or whatever. But what made him pick those really crazy type of movies that nobody would have considered to ever like go anywhere?
Oh, well, I think ultimately that's the type of actor he wanted to be. I think he always wanted to be that. I
Mm-hmm.
think the action genre was a byproduct of just Die Hard being as big as it was.
Uh,
But I don't think he didn't go to Hollywood with the intention of I'm turning myself into the next action star. That came by default. And he was good at it. He recognized that he was believable as a rugged sort of blue collar guy. It's
mm-hmm.
interesting because the action stars after the fact became like even in that run, Keanu Reeves in Speed, was a regular dude. You kind of bought him as a cop. There was a run of other actors who we were coming off of the Arnold's, the Jean-Claude Van Damme's, the
Mm-hmm.
larger than life
Yeah.
80s guys. And in the 90s, we had a run of regular guys, and they were inspired by Bruce's blue collar relatability.
Mm-hmm.
Then it became superheroes, and now it's superheroes. And I don't know if there's a place for someone like Bruce. Could the blue collar cop carry a movie? Maybe cyclically we'll come back around to that again. But I just don't think. I think Bruce was big when he was big.
So I'm gonna challenge you on that because
Okay,
I love Marvel's movies. I love any superhero movies. I'm a huge DC fan, as you know. He could play the Martin Freeman character. He could
sure,
play the who's Coulson. Totally,
yeah, yeah.
totally. I mean, and he would make it his own. So I don't agree with you.
Well, he was GI Joe also,
That's true.
but he
Yeah.
was GI Joe opposite The Rock.
Mm.
So The Rock brought that one presence, and then Bruce brought his stoic, I'm the original Joe kind of thing. And it worked.
Yeah.
Those two playing off of each other worked. It was
But
terrific.
but isn't it because and people in the chat can certainly chime in on this, is that wasn't it because they were funny? I mean, when I think of The Rock, yeah, he's like, whatever, but he's also super funny. As
Yeah.
I think of Bruce Willis, he's funny, he's snarky, he's smart, you know.
Yes. Yeah, well-rounded. The musician aspect that we talked about, someone who seems like performative, someone who seems funny, someone who seems charming, someone who seems, you said it earlier, accessible.
Mhm.
There's something about a movie star being accessible, and willing to sort of poke fun. Here's a bit that we haven't talked about yet. His cameo in Ocean's 12, um,
Oh,
which to me is one of the funniest scenes in his career.
yep.
And for people who are listening who aren't familiar with it, it's hard to explain, but it's an entire bit where like Julia Roberts' character has to go through a scene where everyone thinks she looks like Julia Roberts. And then Bruce Willis recognizes her as Julia Roberts, but it's Julia playing a character who's not Julia. But Bruce's ability to just poke fun at himself and his celebrity stature throughout that whole sequence, he lets his guard down, he lets himself be part of the punchline, and too few actors would do that even,
Mhm.
like go back and rewatch that scene. It is a masterclass in comedic timing. And just the way that throughout the sequence people keep saying to him how they had figured out the twist of the Sixth Sense beforehand. Like Matt Damon's like, yeah, I kind of realized it when you were doing this and he goes, oh, you figured it out, huh? That's really funny. And it's his ability to get down to our level and be that sort of accessible, poking fun at himself thing. But again, like whenever he got a chance to flex his muscle and do his own thing, he would go and do a movie like Nobody's Fool because it allowed him to have 5 or 6 scenes with Paul Newman. Like
Mhm,
that's the character actor he always wanted to be.
mhm,
The industry would just kind of put him into, no, 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 you're gonna do, The Last Boy Scout or some other action movie like that. And
mhm,
so then I think after a while, if he knew he had to do action films, he would look for ones that thought outside the box a little bit and find 16 Blocks with director Richard Donner, or
mhm,
Looper with Ryan Johnson, or something like that. So,
mhm.
I still think he was always trying to find interesting projects throughout, and that's why that slew of like late career movies seemed so lazy and so beneath him because he made smart choices over the course of his career that they were deeply puzzling, and now we a little bit know the reason why.
Yeah. And I think that, oh, I just wanted to say really quickly, we're almost out of time. We only have about 5 more minutes. So if you have a question, put it in the Q&A right now. Um, but it goes back to what you were saying about him not needing to be the center of attention because
Yeah.
like Ocean's 12, massive cast of like the best and A-list authors, actors, right? And here
Yeah,
he comes, like taking just like this short scene, but killing it, right? He didn't,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
So,
And if you take something like The Whole Nine Yards as an example as well too, he knew because he comes out of this period where a number of big stars were breaking out of TV. Tom Hanks was on Bosom Buddies before he jumped over to Splash and
mhm,
Bachelor Party. Saturday Night Live was churning out, these TV guys who are making the leap to feature film. Dan Aykroyd, Eddie Murphy, Bill Murray, guys like that. Bruce comes from moonlighting, he goes to television. So he sees Matthew Perry and he knows Matthew Perry's trying to make the leap from Friends to feature film. And Bruce could have just big timed him, like, hey, I'm the movie star here. But he knew that his part in The Whole Nine Yards was to set up this kid and have him do all the physical comedy in the pratfalls. And Bruce was going to entertain himself by playing with Kevin Pollak or Michael Clark Duncan or Amanda Peet. He didn't need to be the center of attention. He could be there and set up all of these other people. And I didn't appreciate how much he did that until I went back and rewatched all of his stuff.
mhm.
Armageddon, same thing. Armageddon's got an incredible supporting cast. Owen Wilson, Steve Buscemi, Michael Clark Duncan again, Billy Bob Thornton, Ben Affleck, all these guys who are surrounding Bruce, who is the biggest star in the cast. But he's very happy to be like, here's your turn. You get this part. Oh, you do this scene. You get that. You do this. I'm still here. Whenever you need me, I'm gonna rise up, but I don't need to be the guy. And he's like that in all of his films. He doesn't need to be the guy, and it blows me away that he's had such a big career that he did, and has a dozen movies you could point to like that.
I wonder what he would say about what happened to Matthew Perry.
Oh, I know, I know. That's really heartbreaking. It's more sadness and tragedy.
Yeah, absolutely. But also because, as you said, he wanted to help him. He acted sort of as a mentor, right? So to see somebody that he had mentored go
Yep,
down that path must be for, even when he was before the aphasia, just probably really heartbreaking.
I'm sure. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
sure.
It's a South Jersey thing to not be center of attention all the time. I don't know. I grew up in New Jersey too. I like being the center of attention. Um, so we just a few more minutes. What is up next for you, Sean? I mean, this has been, this book just came out, and I will let everybody know how they can buy it or get it from the library. But um, you said you've done three in a row, three books in a row. Do you have something else on tap?
No, I need to take a long break. I did not realize how much work a book is. A book is so much research and so much. As somebody who writes for the web and things are immediate and you can go back and change stuff, it terrifies me how a book is eternal. You put it on the page and it's going to live there.
Mhm.
Specifically with Bruce, I wrote capsule reviews of all 115 movies in the back of the book.
Oh.
Um, and I've learned that my review of something can change over the years, not drastically, but a 2.5 movie could become a 3-star movie,
Mhm.
because you watch it later and you're a different person and you realize something different about it. So committing star ratings to each of his movies in a permanent fashion terrified me, you know. But I have ideas for other things, but I'm definitely taking a break. I'm definitely gonna rest for a little while and focus on Cinema Blend on the website that I run. And I play in a band. It's my other creative release. And so, I've got other things to do.
Okay.
My family's keeps me busy. So uh but I'm sure I'll do something else a little bit later, and we'll see.
Okay. So if you could write about anything in the whole world,
Yeah.
what would it be?
Oh, it's a great question. I mean, I'm obsessed with comic book movies. I'm obsessed with this run of this historic run of comic book movies that we've been on. Like I don't think people understand still the magnitude of something like the MCU,
Mhm.
or this new universe that James Gunn's trying to launch, and to build a universe from scratch, and how much of an impact these movies still have on the film industry in general. Like, for people who weren't paying attention to the headlines of the box office, it was doom and gloom. It was like, our theater's done.
Was it Doctor Doom?
Yes, until Deadpool and Wolverine come around,
Yeah.
and it's $1 billion movie, and then everyone's like, "Oh yeah, I like going to the movies again." So Alien Romulus does okay. The Crow is going to do okay. We're probably going to get into Transformers One. Like, that industry is the lifeblood of Hollywood right now in a way that no one could have predicted. And so I guess I would want to dig back into that in some way, shape, or form, and
Mhm.
continue to write about the impact that that has on people, because similar to Bruce, I think it's overlooked. I think it's slept on a little bit, and I think maybe it might take a few years of separation from it for people to potentially realize the import of those movies.
Is it because, and we just have another minute, but I'm really fascinated by this topic because I love comic books as well, and I love the comic book movies, but comic books were always denigrated by literature, but people that read literature,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
And now it's become more popular and more accepted, but the
Mhm.
movies are being treated the same way. Like they're not a form of art, a high form of art. But we love it, right? So like where's that schism? Like what's going on there?
I don't think it's any different than I kid you not, than Shakespeare. They're classic stories that are retold and retold with new people and different visions, but the
Mhm.
core stuff is there. If you're into storytelling, the core stuff is there.
Mhm.
And they're always going to appeal to a younger generation, and we always want to get a younger generation involved in storytelling. And so, to me, if that's their gateway into films and storytelling, then there's nothing bad about that. I'm a big fan of that.
Agreed. Okay, so we never heard from you, Sean, if you think Die Hard is a Christmas movie.
It is the best Christmas movie. It is a staple of every Christmas season. It has every aspect of a Christmas movie, and there should be no debate whatsoever. It is a Christmas movie, tried and true, 100%.
All right, you heard it here, folks. Sean O'Connell says that it is a Christmas movie. Done.
Done.
No more discussion. Well, thank you so much for this wonderful hour of conversation, Sean. It's been really eye-opening and just a pleasure, really, to go back to some of those films that I loved as I'll say, a toddler.
Well, and I do hope people check out the book, and the book should be a guidebook for you to go learn more about Bruce's movies. Like, pick the book up, read a chapter, put it down, go watch something. Like, it's a companion piece to all of his movies. And so I hope that people learn a lot more about movies of his that they haven't even seen before, and that the book is a catalyst to them checking out some really great films.
I think film festivals coming our way, right? Like we'll just watch them all together at some point.
That'd be great.
So thank you. And thank you all for being here with your wonderful comments and in support of my non-polls. I appreciate it. And I hope to see you all again soon. Sean, I can't wait for whatever you come out with next.
Thanks so much, Mina.
Have a good night, everybody.